got a question for you. What do you want to leave behind? So, we've got 70 and 10, whatever it is. I actually thought I'd die before the age of 30. People tried to kill me, people I care about got killed. And here I am, 44 years old, still going strong, but, something could happen tomorrow. But let's say I'm banking on getting another 30 years out of this slightly wasted body. What do I want to leave behind? Well, my heroine, one of my heroines, is my granny. And Granny, she definitely played, the supporting role behind an amazing man who was my grandfather. But, she served the Lord for 40 years in Rwanda. And once he died in England, she, age 83, says, well, you're just going to stick me in an old age home. Whereas actually in Rwanda, I'm an umukecuru. I'm a wise old dame. And so much to maybe her children, my parents and uncles and aunties, concerned, she's like, I'm out of here, I'm going back. And she went back out to be with her daughter, my aunt, in Rwanda. And she went to the widows. She was a widow. Well, there were 15,000 widows in her diocese from the Rwandan genocide, and she had her work cut out. So she started a widows meeting, and first week 30 came, then 80, then 100, and 200, 300, 400, and then they had to split because there wasn't room for them in the cathedral, and they'd meet each week and they'd give like 5 cents, some pathetically small number, but times 400 each week, they actually saved up enough money to buy an igitengi, a sort of cloth that would identify them around the town. They would support each other, and whilst the men were invariably just getting drunk on banana beer, they'd be building each other's houses and empowering each other. And she was creating this whole massive movement of women, and then they would take the women's daughters, the widows' daughters, to teach them a trade, because without a father there, they were routinely taken for sex. And so it's absolutely beautiful. And God was doing an amazing work through Granny Gilbo. Now, fast forward 3 years, she's 86 years old now, and this is her last day in action on planet Earth. And they long prepared this widows' meeting, cathedral packed, and she let rip on them. She says, dodgy old 86-year-old. She was Cambridge educated, so she's compass mentis. She was fully sharp, but she was like, and she let rip on them for an hour preaching. Preaching is pretty tiring in Africa, sweaty and all that. And there's a last photo of her taken alive, doing the traditional unhooded dance like that. And then she said goodbye. In French, you've got au revoir and adieu. And au revoir is to the re-seeing, and adieu is till God. And her goodbye was an adieu. Because she waddled home and had a game of Scrabble, and then had a stroke and went to be with Jesus. Now, what a life. A few years ago, I was preaching in Chicago. I was in this Winnetka suburb. I was in this random church. It was pretty much an all-white church. There was one black person in the church. And he came up to me afterwards and he said, Gilbo, your grandparents changed my life. And I was like, what? I didn't need to be convinced that my grandparents had lived their life, had given their life, surrendered, sacrificed their life for something that was worthwhile. But it was just so beautiful, thousands of miles away, across the oceans, that God was just giving me this encouragement that he was a guy saying, thanks to what your grandparents did, I am now following Jesus, making a difference, making my life count into eternity. And, as I think back to Granny, when she died, and this is a bit facetious maybe and disrespectful, forgive me, but, when your grandparents die as grandkids, you'd like, hopefully they'll leave you some money, right? Well, all Granny left us was some tasteless hand-knitted jumpers, sweatshirts. They're hideous, right? Thanks a lot. But more seriously, what she did leave is a living inheritance in the lives of thousands, no tens, no, I'd say millions, well, let's say hundreds of thousands, whatever, masses of lives, because, well, as a team, they translated the Bible, so straight away they gave 6 million people a chance to read it in their own language. And they're part of the East African Revival, and they just gave and gave and gave, and they, these are brilliant Cambridge-educated people. Grandpa was the top brain of his generation, he was awarded Senior Wrangler, and his lectures like, what a waste going off to Central Africa. What a waste of that brain. And it wasn't a waste. He was literally used to transform so many X number of lives. And so my question for myself and for each one of us is, what do you want to leave behind? Wouldn't it be great to leave behind just a few tasteless hand-knitted sweatshirts? But actually, so much more than that. Lives transformed in the here and now, because we believe in life before death, but also into eternity, because we believe in life after death? And won't that question actually focus us in terms of thinking, each day when I get up, what am I going to do today? Am I going to waste today? Am I just going to go through the motions? Or am I going to make my life count? Am I going to be strategic? Am I going to live with intent and purpose? Because the stakes are incredibly high. And so just let that question affect you deeply and rattle around in your brain, and would you wrestle with it? What do I want to leave behind?